Mike Johnson is so obsessed with the nuclear family and covenant marriage, yet he doesn't even live at home with his wife and kids and has not for a while. What's the problem, Mike? Trouble at home? I know those covenant marriage laws, they're very tricky and they do require you to live apart from your spouse for a total of 2 years before you can file for divorce, but I'm sure that's not what's going on. I'm sure there's no trouble in paradise. I know Mike Johnson's tiny hands and non-existent backbone make his wife feel very safe and secure in all aspects of their relationship. But on a serious note, Mike Johnson's living situation is bizarre and needs to be talked about. So since at least December of 2024, Mike Johnson has been living with a pastor named Steve Berger. And Steve Berger's mission since 2021 has been to be a minister to Congress to help turn their belief system into legislation. Steve Berger and his wife, Sarah Berger, operate their congressional ministry in a townhouse that is about 2 blocks away from the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And this ministry is called Ambassador Services International, and it is inside of this organization's townhouse where Mike Johnson is currently living. But there's some lore to this townhouse and the actual owner of it. So this is said townhouse. This is its proximity from the United States Capitol, so it's very close. But this townhouse that Mike Johnson is living in with this pastor and his wife is not just any townhouse in Washington, D.C. It is formerly Frederick Douglass's original home. Frederick Douglass's home was bought by the Smithsonian and turned into a subsect of the African American Museum of Art. But in 2021, a major Red Party donor who is affiliated with the Heritage Foundation purchased the Smithsonian Museum of African American Art, Frederick Douglass's former home, renovated it, and turned it into a swanky congressional townhouse where this pastor could operate out of. The sole listed owner of this townhouse that Mike Johnson is currently living in is a man named Lee Beeman. On top of being a part of the Heritage Foundation and this Ambassador Services International organization, he is also a major Trump donor. And during his divorce from his fourth wife back in 2018, he was accused of some really horrendous things. The owner of the home Mike Johnson is living in was accused of forcing his wife at the time to watch training videos, which were videos of him engaging in physical acts with workers of a certain nature. He was also accused of forcing his wife to engage in group physical activities with him, her, and someone who they would pay. His fourth ex-wife also said that he was so addicted to watching adult content that he would even watch it in the living room, surrounded by family members, even his minor son. The fact that such a disgusting man owns Frederick Douglass's home is so incredibly disappointing, but at the same time, I know the ancestors are gonna deal with y'all, and that brings me a little bit of peace. So Steve and Sarah Berger live in this townhouse full-time that is owned by Lee Beeman, and they operate their congressional ministry out of this townhouse, and it's very common for them to invite members of Congress to live with them in this townhouse to be able to work with them and mentor them directly. Like I said, Mike Johnson has been living with this couple since at least December of 2024. And before that, last year, former North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop, who was the congressman who brought forward the very controversial anti-trans bathroom bill, he also lived in this home with Sarah and Stephen Berger. He was still a member of Congress. I believe his term has ended now, but while he was still in Congress, he was also living with this couple. I did a little bit of listening and reading and looking into kind of like what the main frame of Sarah and Stephen's belief system is so that I could better understand what they are feeding into the minds of our Congress. In a nutshell, they are a textbook example of accelerationists. They believe that the United States needs to be a Christian nation because the coming of Christ is going to occur after one more massive world conflict. And during this time, everyone who believes exactly what they believe and buys into their belief system, they will be saved from an eternity in hell. That's the gist. Jumbled up in that mess is a hatred for the World Health Organization, believing they are operating a satanic plot. conspiracy theories, believing that members of the LGBTQ community are demonic, etc., etc. Like I said, Mike Johnson has been living here since at least December of 2024, and it's really very peculiar because Mike Johnson was reported after he was placed into the position of House Speaker, he was sleeping in his office. Very peculiar. Look, I don't know what the heck is going on, but I'm getting real sick and tired of how these folks are screaming at us about the nuclear family, but they are leaving their wife and kids to shack up with other couples. Like, stop listening to the Fresh and Fit podcast and come back to reality. Like, you guys are so painfully hypocritical, and it's getting old.